Imagine a name synonymous with wealth, power, and the very fabric of America. A name that built railways, grand mansions, and an empire so vast it was hard to imagine it ever crumbling. This is the story of the Vanderbilts, a dynasty that went from being the richest family in America to, well, where are they now? How did a fortune that once dwarfed the U.S. Treasury simply vanish? It all starts with one man, Cornelius Vanderbilt, also known as the Commodore. Born in 1794 to a poor family on Staten Island, he was tough, ruthless, and had an incredible eye for business. He borrowed $100 from his mother to start a small ferry service. From that single boat, he built a shipping empire, dominating the waterways. But he didn't stop there. When the gold rush hit, he saw an opportunity not in digging for gold, but in transporting the people who were. He created a shortcut through Nicaragua, making a fortune. Then, in his late 60s, an age when most people are retiring, the Commodore pivoted. He saw the future, and it was on rails. He sold his ships and poured everything into railroads. It was a massive gamble, but it paid off spectacularly. By the time of his death in 1877, Cornelius Vanderbilt had amassed a fortune of over $100 million. In today's money, that's equivalent to billions, making him one of the wealthiest people in all of history. He controlled a staggering 1 out of every $20 in circulation in the entire United States. He left the bulk of this empire, about 95% of it, to his favorite son, William Henry Vanderbilt. The Commodore's final words of advice were simple: keep the money together. It was a warning, a plea to preserve the dynasty he had built from nothing. But as we'll see, that advice would be spectacularly ignored. William Henry Vanderbilt, or Billy, was a different man from his father, more mild-mannered. He was initially dismissed by the Commodore as a clumsy fool, but Billy had a secret weapon. He was a brilliant businessman in his own right. He took the $100 million he inherited and, in just 8 years, doubled it to $200 million. He consolidated the railroad empire, expanded its reach, and made the Vanderbilt name even more powerful. He was, for a time, the richest man in the world. He understood the responsibility that came with such wealth. He famously said, "The public be damned," in a moment of frustration, but in reality, he managed the family fortune with a steady hand. He built a grand mansion on Fifth Avenue, setting a new standard for luxury. But he was still fundamentally a businessman, focused on preserving and growing the family's wealth. When he died, he tried to learn from his father's mistakes. Instead of leaving everything to one son, he divided the fortune among his children, hoping to ensure its longevity. But this act of division, meant to be fair, was the first crack in the foundation of the Vanderbilt empire. With the money no longer concentrated in one powerful entity, the focus began to shift from growing the business to spending the inheritance. The third generation of Vanderbilts was about to enter the scene, and they weren't interested in the grimy world of railroads and balance sheets. They were interested in something else entirely: high society. This is where the story takes a glamorous and fateful turn. The Gilded Age was in full swing, and New York's high society was a closed circle, dominated by old money families like the Astors. The Vanderbilts, despite their immense wealth, were considered new money, uncultured and unwelcome. This did not sit well with Alva Vanderbilt, the wife of William Henry's son, Willie K. Vanderbilt. Alva was ambitious, fiery, and determined to break into the elite circle. She decided the way to do it was through sheer jaw-dropping extravagance. She commissioned a magnificent mansion at 660 Fifth Avenue, a French chateau-style palace that became known as the Petit Chateau. It was a masterpiece of architecture and opulence, designed to make a statement. And for its grand debut, Alva planned a party, a costume ball so legendary it's still talked about today. She sent out 1,200 invitations, but strategically left one person off the list: Carolyn Astor, the Queen of New York society. The message was clear. Mrs. Astor's daughter, Carrie, was desperate to attend the ball of the century. This forced Mrs. Astor's hand. In a symbolic act of surrender, she had her footman deliver her calling card to the Vanderbilt mansion, officially acknowledging their place in society. The ball was a triumph. Alva had won, but it came at a staggering cost. The party alone cost the equivalent of several $millions today, and this was just the beginning. The Vanderbilts were now in a competition, not in business, but in spending. The race to outdo each other, and the rest of society, became the family's primary occupation. The grandchildren of the Commodore embarked on an unprecedented building spree. They weren't just building houses, they were building palaces. In Newport, Rhode Island, the summer playground for the ultra-rich, they built cottages that were anything but. There was the Breakers, Cornelius Vanderbilt, II's 70-room Italian Renaissance palace, which took thousands of workers to build and maintain. Its rival was Marble House, built by William K. and Alva, a dazzling monument of white marble that cost $11 million back in the 1890s, with over half of that spent just on the marble itself. Back in New York, the stretch of Fifth Avenue became known as Vanderbilt Row, as one Vanderbilt mansion after another rose into the sky. They built country estates, yachts bigger than some of the Commodore's original steamships, and filled their homes with priceless art. They were living like royalty, but there was a fundamental problem. They were spending the principal, not just the interest. The family fortune, which came from a single, powerful railroad business, was now being drained to fund a lifestyle of competitive consumption. The businesses that generated the wealth were neglected. While the family was busy planning parties and commissioning architects, the world was changing. The era of the railroad monopoly was ending. The fall was not sudden, but a slow, steady decline over decades. The 20th century brought new challenges that the Vanderbilts were ill-equipped to handle. First, the introduction of income tax in 1913 meant that vast fortunes could no longer be passed down untouched. Then came the Great Depression, which battered what was left of their railroad and real estate holdings. But the biggest factor was the family itself. The drive and ambition of the Commodore were gone. Subsequent generations were raised in such luxury that the concept of work was foreign. They were philanthropists, yachtsmen, and socialites, but they were not builders or innovators. George Washington Vanderbilt, too, for example, poured his inheritance into creating the Biltmore estate in North Carolina. It's an architectural marvel, the largest private home in the U.S., but it was a financial black hole that nearly bankrupted him. He had to sell off 87,000 acres of its land to the federal government just to keep it afloat. This pattern repeated across the family branches. The mansions on Fifth Avenue became too expensive to maintain. One by one, they were torn down to make way for office buildings and department stores. The Petit Chateau, the palace that symbolized Alva's social victory, was demolished just 40 years after it was built. By the 1970s, a century after the Commodore's death, the Vanderbilt family held a reunion. Of the 120 family members who attended, not a single one was a millionaire. So where did all the money go? It wasn't stolen or lost in a single bad deal. It was simply spent. It was diluted through generations, taxed by the government, and consumed by a lifestyle that treated a finite fortune as an infinite resource. The railroad empire was eventually broken up and sold off. The great houses were demolished or turned into museums. The Vanderbilt name, once the most powerful in American finance, slowly faded from the headlines. The story of the Vanderbilts is more than just a tale of riches to rags. It's a powerful lesson about wealth, legacy, and the difference between making money and keeping it. The Commodore built an empire through grit and vision. His son doubled it through shrewd management. But the generations that followed saw the fortune not as a business to be nurtured, but as a treasure chest to be emptied. They won their war for social acceptance, but lost the economic empire in the process. Today, the most visible legacy of the Vanderbilts isn't a business empire, but the monuments to their spending. The Biltmore Estate, the breakers in Newport, and Grand Central Terminal in New York, a beautiful station built by the family at the height of their power. There's also Vanderbilt University, endowed by the Commodore, a lasting contribution to education. Perhaps the most famous Vanderbilt today is Anderson Cooper, the CNN anchor, who is a descendant of the Commodore through his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt. He has famously said that he received no inheritance, a testament to how completely the great fortune has dissipated. The Vanderbilt saga is a cautionary tale, a reminder that no matter how vast a fortune is, it can't survive without the same ambition and discipline that created it. The Commodore's advice to keep the money together was ignored, and the result was the quiet, gradual end of America's greatest dynasty. Thank you for watching. If you found this story fascinating, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history's most incredible stories. See you next time.